June 22nd, 2022. Well, I wanted to discuss this bill that's getting a lot of attention in the gun rights community here, which is formally titled the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act or something like that. And I've had a chance to go through the text and read a lot of the details. I've been seeing on Twitter a lot of our usual people screaming traitors and stuff like that, and thinking that John Cornyn is joined up with Bloomberg or something, or Biden, and neither is the case. And I'm going to kind of go through what it is, and a little bit what I'm really addressing here is what I call basically strategy for protecting the Second Amendment. And here's the problem. Probably given a poll, a public opinion poll, a majority of people are probably for the Second Amendment. But when it comes down to the details, the real fact of the matter is a majority really isn't for the Second Amendment, and that's what we're fighting against. All the people are confused, misunderstand things, because at least if you want to see my video on my idea of gun control and the Second Amendment, I believe that the key thing of the Second Amendment is fundamentally the right to own weapons that's compatible with the standard Army rifle. Because that's what it always was about. It was about the militia phase is not about a state organization. It's about individuals having weapons that can form a militia, if you will, or contribute to a national defense. Now you could say, well, this is archaic. Maybe it is, in an age of nuclear weapons and everything. Although, if you look at Ukraine, it isn't that archaic there, is it? So what I'm getting at is okay. And then, of course, all the other self-defense against crime and everything else, and of course, hunting. But the point I'm making is that's what this is all about. And with the adoption of the M14, and particularly with the exception of and definitely with the M16, that conflicted with the Federal Firearms Act was passed by FDR back in the gangster eras of the 30s. That effectively prohibited that. And so that was a big weakening of the Second Amendment's traditional meaning right there. Okay, so how does that apply to this current bill, and what does it do? And I think what has to be understood, first of all, is it's not a gun control bill. And that's why I said in the previous video how I think the Democrats are getting rolled here by the Republicans. The Democrats want to they do want to ban your AR-15 or any other similar rifle. They want to even confiscate them, okay? With some kind of forced buyback program, okay, where you probably be paid less than market value too. This is the kind of thing that the Democrats and the left wants to do, and I don't see anything in this bill that even comes close to that kind of philosophy. In fact, I think it's designed to protect the Second Amendment rights as much as possible in a situation in which the Constitution is what the Supreme Court says it is, and that's the horrible fact of the world we live in. The real meaning of the words is interpreted by courts, not as interpreted by truth, if you will. Okay, by the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe if you're on YouTube and can, and you can forward these to other people, and those that are subscribed can make comments. I'm interested in the discussion. So, okay, let's get on to cases. I've gone through this thing in detail. And I think what I see in here is not that frightening, actually. Unless you're a criminal, basically. If you're a non-criminal, if you're a law-abiding person that can pass the pre-existing background check, for the most part, you can still buy any firearm or firearm accessory that you could have bought before this bill came up. It doesn't change anything there at all. Okay, the exception would be for a person in the age of 18 to 20 that has a bad juvenile record. There can be a little bit of a waiting period for that, and apparently a little bit of a extra background check into the juvenile record to see if there's something. If it was an adult issue, you would be prohibited, from getting the firearm at that point. So that's but obviously created by things like Uvalde, like Parkland, like some other cases. It would have nothing to do with Sandy Hook at all, since the mother bought the firearms and owned them. But the point is that's probably one of the biggest motivations for anything actually happening. The other is the mental health provisions, which provides money through various programs to provide mental health. It looks particularly, I guess, to the disadvantage, it looks to me like, since they're talking CHIPS and Medicaid, a lot in the text. Again, you'd have to really be a lawyer and really cognizant of vast amounts of the federal code to 100% understand it, although I think I can grasp most of the changes. So that's what's going on with that. There's a lot of focus on strengthening the laws on straw purchases. And remember, straw purchases are the primary way in which criminals get their firearms. And the other is buying them from gun traffickers that get them from various means, including theft, but burglaries and so forth. But this is really a crime prevention. I think somebody once said there was no crime prevention, and I think there really is there. I think that's helpful. Will it be highly effective? That's another issue. And the big thing that everybody's really spun up about is of course, red flag. And I've talked about this before. Reading the text of what's in there, and first of all, it's not a red flag law itself. It will not pass a red flag law itself. What it does do is what the federal government often does, is offer money for states to do what the federal government wants it to do. If you do what they want to do, you get the money. If you don't get the money. Well, personally, if the law was something I didn't want, I'd be willing to forego the money. Let's put it that way. Basically, though, there's a lot of good language in it about people's, rights under the process and rights to legal representations, adjudication, and so forth. So it looks to me like it might actually rein in some of the already existing. The 19 states and D.C. already have red flag laws. It may actually have the effect of reining some of those in and giving the people that are being targeted more rights. That's a little bit of a TBD, but I see things in there that I think that rights groups such as NRA, GOA, Second Amendment Foundation, etc., can actually use on the basis of lawsuits. And with a conservative Supreme Court like we have now, it's possible that we may actually be able to make some headway on some of that. Okay. The one thing I didn't like is when they said not at government expense. I don't think that prohibits the government from paying for it, but I would like court-appointed lawyer to be available to represent the person that's being targeted with a red flag complaint prior to it being executed, so that the judge would have both sides of the case before an order was issued. Another thing that you people saying without due process, I'm not sure that's true either, because you can be arrested for a felony on a judge's order, and if you want bail, you're going to definitely have to, especially for a felony, you're going to have to surrender your firearms to get the bail. It's a condition of bail. That's very common right now before any of this came up. So is it any really different? Well, maybe a little bit, because it would be due to some kind of a complaint. So I don't know. I think there's, I'm not wild about the whole idea, but, compared to what the Democrats want to do, which is literally ban whole classes of firearms, and which they're doing in 2 states right now, Washington and Rhode Island. I think that we have to be. That's what I mean about the strategy of this. You have to have a little give and a little take in order to win. You can't just sit there and say no, 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 and then lose an election and then end up having something a lot worse. And I think what this does is takes the momentum out of what Biden wants to do. Some people are characterizing this as surrendering to Biden. I don't think it is at all. I think it's defeating Biden. Biden wanted to pass an assault weapon ban. He was even talking about how bad 9mm pistols were. And does that mean they should be banned too? I mean, this is the kind of thing where Biden's at. This is not at all that. And the idea of doing something that basically takes the place of what he wants to do, but doesn't do any significant damage, I think is probably a good idea. Okay, let's get to another thing, this boyfriend deal. Okay, that text is kind of interesting. It sort of leaves a lot of it up to the courts to decide. It's a little interesting about how it talks about a long-term, romantic relationship, and And basically, the person to be under that would have to be convicted of a violent assault or abuse. As I understand it, not just charged, but actually convicted in a court or accepting a plea bargain. And it also has a mitigating factor that if there's only one incident, after 5 years, this can go away. So it's not a permanent ban like everything else in these laws are. And to me, that is a step forward. I really don't like the idea of permanent bans based on misdemeanors at all, regardless. I've been against that ever since the 90s, which was, when the first one was passed, which does affect people that were, when they're married or have a child together and so forth. And so I think this is a step in the right direction as far as that part of the language. And to me, it might be a foot in the door for future legislation to kind of roll back some of this other misdemeanor stuff. I mean, you have to have compromise to get stuff through the Senate, or because of the filibuster. But also, if it wasn't for the filibuster, anything you achieve in this session, you might lose in the next. To have stability, you need to have something that requires a supermajority. That's why I've been on the filibuster from the beginning of these videos and why we need it. So, and the fact is, this may be basically a tip of the hat to Chris and Sinema, who, remember, if it wasn't for Sinema and Manchin, this country would be well on its way to becoming California right now. They saved us from that for whatever reason they did. I presume Manchin was over his belief in the tradition of the Senate, and Sinema is perhaps for more pragmatic reasons involving trying to get reelected in a purple state, and particularly in an election year where it may be trending Republican in 2024. So, I think that's. But let's face it, you have to compromise if you're going to get anything done in the Senate. And this is not a very bad compromise, I think, compared to what might be. And after all, people beat up their girlfriends, don't do it. And don't take an easy plea bargain if charged if you really want to preserve your rights, I guess. But, all I can say is that I don't think we're going against the really, the kind of people we necessarily want to be running around with guns necessarily here. I am worried about the details and how it's implemented. But at any rate, that's what it is. And I think there's room there for also court challenges. I mean, because to me, how do you get this in a background check system? I mean, it's one thing to say, were they convicted and were they married? That's kind of objective fact. But a vague romantic relationship, I don't know. The other aspect of it is it doesn't supposed to include casual acquaintanceships and social events or business. That those kind of situations are not counted. So, okay, there you are. But at least I'm laying out for you what's in this thing. As I see pluses and minuses there. And I believe some of this money is fungible, so you don't have to have a red flag law. You can do some of the other programs like mental health and so forth, and hopefully hardening schools. I'm not sure how much that's in there, but that's probably the one thing that could be useful. Remember, the real threat to more encroachment on Second Amendment rights is these school shootings. As you notice, not anything was moving when there was a supermarket shooting in New York. But when there was a school shooting in Texas, things started moving, as it did after Sandy Hook. Also, another thing that's in here or that's not in here, there's no universal background check. There are rules about selling weapons for the purpose of committing felonies. And in other words, what I would take from that is if you're involved in a private sale of a firearm, know who you're selling to. If you're selling it to a friend, a buddy at the range, a relative, in a state that allows it, some states don't, that's okay. To complete strangers, I'd avoid that. You might get tagged into something pretty nasty there, I bet. But it also has a tighter definition of who needs to have an FFL license to deal. And it's really trying to roll back what I've referred to in previous videos as what I call the gray area sellers. People that are buying up guns and then selling them basically for profit, but doing it privately as a private person and not an FFL. It tries to rein that back and restrict it more to people who really are just having a collection and maybe trading around so they can sell one to have money to buy another. Things like that. That would still be legal, but really just running a business outside of being an FFL might become more precarious under this. So that kind of sums up the thing. I'm not going wild, but the fact of the matter is I think it is going to pass, barring some major pushback. Or I guess it's possible if some kind of a killer amendment got passed. I'm hoping, well, I really don't want that to happen. I think that actually this might be useful to us in a way. Like I said, it's I'm not necessarily wild about the whole idea, but at the same time, you have to deal with the real politics if you're going to win. I saw somebody saying, don't support any party that has one person that is want to encroach anything. I said, so you want to lose all your rights, because that means unconditional surrender to the gun ban community. If that's really what you want, there's give and take, and like in a war, sometimes you retreat to a better defensive position, and then you get ready for the counterattack. The counterattack may well come in the courts on some of these things, because there's provisions in this law or bill, let's say, that if enacted, I think gives some groundwork perhaps to file certain kinds of lawsuits and maybe roll certain things backward that are already in place, I think. We'll see on that. I mean, don't get too optimistic. But anyhow, that kind of is my assessment of what's in play here. I don't see this. I think this is basically along the lines of trying to take the momentum away from the left on this issue. Just take a look at the two bills that came out of the House, and then you'll see this thing is really not hardly even a gun control bill, really, in my opinion. It's more like an amendment to the existing acts that kind of maybe corrects a few things, basically, makes a few adjustments, but doesn't really break major new ground, in my opinion. And we're still waiting to see what the NRA has to say about it. I think we already know the GOA is full-scale opposition, as you'd expect. But, of course, they're big supporters of the bump stock, too. I mean, okay. They're the no-compromise gun rights group. And I can see that. I can see where they're coming from. But at the same time, I think the real political people realize you have to compromise to get anything done, and maybe take some of the momentum out of some of these things that are happening at the state level, hopefully. So at any rate, I want to wrap this up for now. My addresses of my social media accounts on Twitter and all the others are in the description below. And I'll put a link to my previous video on my viewpoint on the gun control and the Second Amendment also. So, and I'll wrap this up for now. Until next time.